How's it going, everybody? So I want to be talking about preference. In my previous video, I mentioned about preference. Now, when people describe a preference, right? It's typically associated with a racial one. It's typically associated with like wanting to be with a certain people group, and the reasons why I've seen it has been that they've had issues in their group. And I mean, I usually let people decisions, let it be, and then, they'll have to figure that out. I say, fair enough, fine. But why do people have a preference? So, if I was like a Latino, let's say that, and I said I have a preference for Dominican women. And my preference for Dominican women is because I know I said generally like Latino. Let's say Colombian. Let's say I'm Colombian. And I say the women over there in Colombia, they don't really like me in the way that I present myself. What if, I don't know Colombian women like that, but let's say Colombian women, they dominate the households. They're very domineering, and they tend to speak their mind and be like a little too blunt, too honest. And let's say as a Colombian person, I'm just like very timid and stuff like that. And I just say, I can't deal with this. I don't like this. And I say, those Dominican women, I come around them and they have a better experience, and I tend to just enjoy them, have a generally more pleasant experience around them. So for me, I can say I have a preference, but that preference should not supersede their personality, their humanity. So people get mad, get sad, get happy, get all those things. We express our emotions as people, as human beings. Sorry, 1 second. So what differs between one person versus another? Well, it's a collection of things, actually. And human beings are pretty complicated just to begin with. So we have our moods, it's essentially like the general long-term feeling that we have. We have emotions, which are things that are in reactions to certain things, stimulus and stuff like that. We have temperament, the ability to handle certain situations without really being emotionally disturbed. We have, now mind you, these are my personal definitions. These are not like psychological. I guess they are sort of psychological, but they're not like backed by experts. You'd have to Google those terms I've mentioned. But in regards to all those things, personality style, are you an introvert, you're extrovert, you're ambivert, do you handle things well? Have you been in any trauma, any long-term issues? Do you have a community that reinforces you through whatever issues you're going through? Do you have a life of poverty? It's just a collection of things that come to contribute to who you are. Another thing such as adoption, were you adopted? Do you have a healthy reinforcement of your culture even though you are adopted? You have a lot of collection. So that's first starting off. B, the person you're talking to, the person whose preferences you have for another person. What are those, right? So for me, I had an ignorant preference. I'm gonna admit that. When I was with my ex, she was black. I was going through my own personal problems. Long story, but in those issues that I did have, I enacted a preference. I spoke about a preference, and it hurts me because those preferences that I spoke about hurt her. And I thought in my mind, even though I had not met a Japanese person at the time, that my preferences were for Asian people and white people. And it was hurtful. It still hurted me thinking about it, because that's what I thought. Until I actually met an Asian person. Not really an Asian person, until I met a Japanese person, because I've met Asian people before, and not really a lot of them, like a handful of them. And those experiences were kind of iffy. But when I met a Japanese person, That's too different. What, it wasn't really all that different, and even the particular person that I met was not all that attractive. And this was like years ago, and I'm just like, huh, who'd have thought? You know, which goes to show you that some of this stuff gets clear with further experience, because we tend to have this fetishization, in my opinion, to defend yourself against whatever things you have. Now, here's what I don't want to do is sit here and make a blanketed term as to why people have certain preferences for other people. Sometimes it's in defense because of your environment. Sometimes it is due to poor self-esteem and that you have a projected sense of security to somebody else. You may think, oh, this person's safe because they're not from my current environment. So back to my analogy, if I was a Colombian and I had a bad time in my own hometown and I prefer people from the Dominican Republic, and I said, well, I just simply have a better experience, then that's a psychological thing in which you're leaning subconsciously towards safety in another people group. And the fallacy with that is that if you don't know said people group, you don't have the full knowledge from the good to the bad of these people, you will be doing yourself a disservice, and you're gonna just get caught up, especially with the opposite sex, in some random scenario, searching for safety and peace in the wrong places. If you have a preference that involves a culture and a people group, and typically most countries have, they're ethnically tied to their nation. So you're gonna find some folks from Cameroon in Africa who are, you know, of African descent. You won't find Dutch. I mean, it all depends on the slave trade, but you won't find Dutch people in Cameroon. You won't find Mexican folks in Barbados or Haiti. Maybe you might, you know, just like you might have some Japanese folks in Brazil. You know, people integrate, people go to different cultures and mix and stuff like that. But typically, generally, the majority population, you have a certain expectation, and that expectation is typically within their same group, ethno-nationally speaking. But okay, so back to my point in preferences. So people have a lot of reasons as to why they have a preference for certain people. My response to it is make sure your preferences are actually backed by something that's legitimate. Everybody gets old, so you can't just say that they're, oh, I like them because they're pretty. That's fine, date them because they're pretty. But no, they're gonna get older. So, you know, if you're gonna be saying, hey, I'm here for a little short time, not a long time, then you need to make that very clear. Oh, they make me feel safe. Great. Keep that same mentality until, you know, when you find like the fullness of them, you know, and just have that be realistic in that expectation. They're not gonna be super awesome and great. Maybe they will. Maybe they are socialized to believe, like maybe in a scenario, folks from the Dominican Republic just are conditioned and socialized to believe that folks from Colombia are just the sweetest people. So they have a perspective that keeps them very nice and sweet toward Colombian people. Maybe that's the case. I have a perspective that is in regards to other countries, to certain ethnic groups. But be realistic in your preferences. If this person has certain cultural values and you can live up to them, and that culture does not condemn you for some reason that has little to do with you, then I say go for it. Have these preferences. Just make sure that they're rooted. They gotta be rooted in something that's not based off something superficial, because that'll always let you down. If this woman could have been any other race and she happened to be a sweet person with a nice temperament and just hits all the notes you're looking for based off your personality, then I say definitely go for it. Definitely talk to her. But be realistic. I have to keep telling you, hitting that home. If you don't have a preference, just be realistic in that preference. If you really just love a culture, in my analogy, if this person who is Colombian just love Dominican women and just love their culture and just really wanted to get to know their culture and knew their dialect and knew what the heck they were saying. Oh shoot. Like he's trying his best to integrate into the culture and learn their language and love its people and contribute to its society, then that is a good reason, in my opinion, to invest time into a culture, invest yourself into a culture. I think that's a great reason, because when you come to that culture, you're not just taking, you're giving back. So that's my reasons. I have been, for myself, maturing a lot, so I don't necessarily have a preference so long as that person's a good person. And a lot of stuff that which I'm emulating, such as fitness and stuff like that, I'm trying to emulate that myself, so I expect that out of another person. So I want those things in a person. But this is just in regards to people who claim they have a preference. You know, I guess that's it. You know, have a preference, be realistic, and have a healthy perspective on it. Yeah.